So I've spent the past 9 months watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for the first time, and before you ask why it took so long, don't! During that time, I have reviewed the first 6 parts adapted from Hirohiko Araki's masterpiece. What started as a show that honestly disturbed me a little, slowly turned into one of the wildest journeys in anime I have ever experienced. The main review series is finished for now, and since this will be my last JoJo video until part 7, I wanted to wrap things up by ranking the Joestars and the parts themselves. So think of this as a little epilogue to the series. And by the end, I want you all watching to comment down below your rankings. And since every JoJo part is defined by its protagonists, we'll start with the Joestars themselves. At 6th place, we have Jonathan Joestar. Sorry Jonathan fans, all 3 of you, but this was the obvious choice. With him being the original JoJo, his sole purpose is to set the standard. Whilst I do enjoy seeing his gentlemanly nature, his lack of a personality is severely overshadowed by the Joestars that come after. That said, I do genuinely believe if he had much more screen time, he'd be higher on a lot of people's lists. That to me has to be the biggest thing holding him back. Despite his short run, he possessed a lot of great moments within that. His death was very shocking to me. Being the first doesn't mean being the worst, and his presence is extremely important in the grand scheme of things. So in spite of his low placement, see it as him needing to carry the bloodline on his massive shoulders. 5th place is the man, Giorno Giovanna. I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of slack for this placement. Out of all of the ones adapted, Giorno is definitely one of the most influential Joestars. He's Dio's son, his design is fire, and his theme is absolutely killer. In fact, if this was a ranking for JoJo themes, his would definitely be my first pick. Gold Experience is a unique stand even before his Requiem. There's clearly a lot to love about him. Despite that though, he ends up taking more of a backseat compared to the rest of the cast. He doesn't feel like the main character of his own part. Whilst I do see the point of Araki's intention with that, it ultimately didn't give me enough of a chance to form a connection with the gangster. These next 2 may surprise you. 4th, we have Josuke Higashikata. Reaffirming what I've just said, Araki decided to focus more on the side characters as opposed to the main JoJos as the series went on, and this was the first case of him doing so. So I really do like Josuke, more than I should actually. Cool design, cool stand, in fact Crazy Diamond is my favorite of the lead stands. The downside is that we don't actually get as much one-on-one screen time with Josuke himself, which is a shame because I view him to be a vastly interesting and probably the most real of the bunch. He could have easily been higher on my list if Araki chose to share more light into his characteristics and flaws. Suffice to say, he's a character I thoroughly enjoyed from start to finish. And 3rd place is Jolyne Cujoh. Out of all of the ones listed, she is the one that surprised me the most. For being the first and only female lead as of now at least, I'm really glad she wasn't underutilized for that and instead celebrated. In some ways, she's the female Josuke in that she also has abandonment issues that stem from her father, except I believe it to be better handled with her. She's very versatile with a grounded stand power, which made all of her fights being enjoyable, even to the end, always having others' interests at heart, risking her life to noble causes, displaying a strong case of perseverance. She doesn't feel like the female one, but instead feels like an incredibly strong lead that aids her story wonderfully. 2nd place goes to the man, Jotaro Kujo. Out of all, he's the only one who took me some time to properly enjoy. I really didn't like this man at first. Upon introduction, he was kinda boring and just straight up unlikable. However, over time, he undergoes a lot of subtle progression that was enough to win me over. Much like the Grinch, his heart grows 3 sizes by the end, and he just gets better and better each part he's in. I strongly believe Jotaro to be a better side character than a main character for this reason. He's certainly the most iconic Joestar with an obvious favorite stand for a very good reason. However, whilst he won his way up to 2nd place, he still falls short to my next pick. And the 1st place is my all-time favorite, Joseph Joestar. Finally, about time I get to glaze this character. Might I add, I believe every variation of Joseph is great, but it's specifically Battle Tendency Joseph that earns this spot. Not only did he show me that JoJo could be much more enjoyable than I initially thought, but he also represents everything I love in a main character. He's charismatic, he's hilarious, and he's incredibly endearing. Predicting his opponent's next line, running away in tactics, have all stuck with me. Joseph doesn't just represent Battle Tendency, he represents the chaotic spirit that makes JoJo so special, easily making him one of my favorite characters in the entire series. That's one done, but of course, a Joestar alone doesn't define a part. Every story in JoJo has its own setting, themes, and cast that shape the journey. So now that the Joestars are ranked, it's time to rank the parts themselves. In 6th place, we have Part 1, Phantom Blood. Again, another obvious choice. Jonathan and his part share the same place. It sets the foundation for the rest of the series, and despite its short run, has great moments scattered around. However, it has a lot of flaws. With only 9 episodes, there wasn't much that could be fleshed out. Hamon felt shoehorned in, and the story literally ends like 3 different times. Side characters such as Zeppeli and Speedwagon are great, however, it's not a surprise when I say Dio hard carried this entire part. And I will say the time it actually ended was a fantastic way to end its contained story. I remember feeling shocked by it when I first saw it. It's clear Araki didn't know what to do with JoJo's at this time, therefore its placement is fitting. But hey, the opening slaps though. 5th, it's Part 3, Stardust Crusaders. I may also get a lot of flack for this too, so let me start off with the positives. This part introduces stands, which to me are easily one of JoJo's strongest themes. The story Araki wanted to tell for this particular case was strong. My favorite villain Dio returns, Joseph returns, and the characters are incredibly memorable. This is the part that changes JoJo. However, it is sorely ruined by its villain of the week structure. It is the longest part in the series for this and has the worst pacing. It was the only part to quite literally make me almost quit the series, and that's not something I can ignore. On top of characters like Kakyoin, Avdol, and at times Iggy getting shafted for Unreleased Bizarre Adventure. Whilst there are good moments such as Jotaro vs Dabi, that's one of my favorite moments in JoJo. A lot of the moments in Egypt and the final confrontation with Dio, it's ultimately not fondly appreciated with entire episodes where Polnareff is turned into a baby. When Part 3 gets going, it really gets going. It starts and ends wonderfully, but its structure is bothersome. Its highs do surpass the highs of the next one, however. 4th goes to Part 6, Stone Ocean. Despite my belief the last part's highs surpass some of this one's, Part 6 is much stronger overall. Marking the finale of the Dio saga, the tension was a constant thrill all throughout. Pucci was a phenomenal villain, and probably the most terrifying I've seen at least. Stand abilities reached peak creativity even if ones like Dragon's Dream and Green Baby were hard to understand. And despite Netflix meddling around, it still managed to feel enjoyable. However, with that being said, Stone Ocean can feel a little uneven at times. Its plot, whilst easy to latch onto, is all over the place, and in my opinion at least, has the worst side cast I've seen thus far. Not that they're bad, they just don't have that chemistry for me. But maybe that was intentional, who knows. Part 6 doesn't do anything bad at all. Its highs are highs and lows are lows, but it doesn't overtake the next few for me. 3rd goes to Part 2, Battle Tendency. This used to be my all-time favorite. After feeling put off from Phantom Blood, Battle Tendency was exactly what I needed early on. Not only does it take all of the flaws from Part 1 and perfects it in Part 2, but it manages to tell an incredibly tight-knit story in a short amount of time. This was before stands, so Hamon was used in very creative ways. Part 1's cast returning in incredible fashion, as well as new ones like Caesar Zeppeli and Lisa displaying great moments. Caesar's death is one of the most hard-hitting ones in this series additionally. Even though Kaz is my least favorite villain in the series, and ultimately is my least favorite aspect of this part, I found great enjoyment in Wamu. I loved his fight with Joseph. The fights are brilliantly creative, the stakes feel enormous, and the entire part is just pure, unfiltered fun. 2nd place is Part 5, Golden Wind. I know this may be a lot of people's favorites, and I went into it knowing that. One notion that's apparent is how Araki grows as a writer in each part, and I believe Golden Wind's mature storyline was his peak, at least from what I've seen. I mean, this is where characters die the most. It's bold in the sense that it has nothing to do with the other parts. The Italian scenery was beautiful, stand battles were the best they've ever been, the cast of characters were the strongest by far. Bruno Bucciarati is easily top 5 characters in JoJo's. He's such a good mother, man. As said in my review, thematically, I believe this to be the best part in JoJo's. The Fate versus Resolve theme was handled really well in every aspect, and this was easily the anime at its best. Giorno vs Diavolo was a great final fight too. It doesn't come without its own flaws, however. Diavolo for me, despite having a cool power and fighting against the very themes of JoJo, lacked any substance as a villain compared to the others. Stan Requiems are the most shoehorned, unexplained power system I've ever seen, and I wasn't a fan of the way Golden Wind ended. In fact, this was the worst ending Araki had given for any part. It's a shame, because Part 5 was almost there to being perfect, except it stumbled slightly when it came to stick the landing. My all-time favorite JoJo part sitting in first place is Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. You may think I'm crazy for having this being my top pick. I can already tell the comments would riot. It's unusual, but out of all of the parts I've seen, this is the one I think about the most. I love the town of Morio so much. It feels like a real, breathing space full of characters I'll never forget. The slice of life formula was new, but incredibly welcoming. The stands here are the best that they've ever been. The fact they can be used for everyday scenarios was incredibly unique. Everything feels connected. Everyone feels connected. Yoshikage Kira was certainly one of the best villains I've not only seen in JoJo's, but honestly in all of Battle Shonen as well. I've never seen him outdone before. Shifting the scale to a slice-of-life town haunted by a terrifying serial killer was a stroke of absolute genius. It has a wonderful ending, with heaps of emotional weight behind it. And personally, this cast of characters, Koichi, Okoyasu, Rohan, and many more along with Josuke, I love so much, not only because they themselves are great characters, but they also remind me a lot of my close friends. I see a lot of resemblance between them. So watching Diamond is Unbreakable, not only was the final set in stone for JoJo's being incredible, it felt nostalgic even for my first time viewing. Out of every JoJo part I watched, Diamond is Unbreakable is the one that stayed with me the most. And that's my ranking. Whilst this won't be the last video I make on JoJo's, it's the last one for now. You know, I went into this series with extremely low expectations after putting it off for years, thinking I wouldn't enjoy it or making it past the first 2 parts. But over the course of what was 17 years of work, I got introduced to Hirohiko Araki's vibrant world and his story. And I'm stepping off, greatly appreciating what I've consumed. There are very few stories that can deliver new experiences as the pages continue to flow, with each bleed with heaps of creativity and heart. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a timeless, once-in-a-lifetime kind of series that is hard to ignore. My experience cannot compare to die-hard, lifelong fans of the series. Whilst that is true, this series has fundamentally changed how I view stories, and it's also really helped me through a lot of hardships these past few months. Thank you so much for joining me through this bizarre tale. It has made the experience that much greater. I hope to see you all again for the day David Production decides to conclude its adaptation for the illustrious, heavenly praised Part 7 Steel Ball Run.